All right, let's get to we got Tim Twentyman waiting, but first, a friend of the show now. Can we call him a friend of the show? We got Amon St. Brown. Has something for everybody.
Does he?
Lions fans, I know you are watching Check the Mic. Just hit the subscribe button. You guys need to pay the bills.
Look at that.
Let's go.
He's right.
He knows.
Yeah, you heard him. It's not us. I'm not saying it. Amon
No.
St. Brown. Pay the bills, Lions fans, as you have been. You guys have been great. Let's bring in Tim and talk more Lions. Hey Tim, how's it going, man?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Appreciate you joining. What's your official title? Just to make sure we get it right, and tell everybody where they can find all your stuff before we talk more Lions.
Yeah, senior writer for DetroitLions.com, and I'm on X at T20man, so you can find all the stuff there.
Awesome, appreciate it. And we've been on your shows before throughout the years, and we've been joking about Lions fans paying the bills. They're because they love our stuff. Every time we talk Lions, the fans are into it. They're loving it. What are you seeing with the fans? The fan base is electric these last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Obviously, the culture that Dan Campbell has built here and Brad Holmes is something that, look, you guys know you've been in the league a long time. It hasn't always been the case here in Detroit. I've covered the team for 15 years, and these last 2 years have been the funnest time covering this team in my tenure. They're fun to watch. They're great for television. Dan Campbell's a quote machine. They're just a fun team. They're a likable team. They score points. They're physical. They hit you in the mouth. They go to, they just put their head down, kind of go to work. That's a lunch pail Detroit mentality, and that's something that this city can get behind. And then when you win, that's fun too. And guys, that atmosphere last year in the first round of the playoffs and that wild card versus the Rams was crazy. I mean, everyone was in their seat 45 minutes before the game started for warmups, and I expect a similar atmosphere Sunday night with what's on the line here. It's essentially a playoff game, right? The loser, like you guys mentioned, has to go on the road. The winner gets a free round, gets a free trip into the second round. And so there's a ton on the line, and it's going to be a crazy environment. You're going to see exactly what this football team means to Detroit. It's going to come through the television Sunday night if you're watching that game.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the most successful sort of rebuilds of culture. Everyone talks about that for sort of down on their luck franchises when they hire a new GM or a new head coach. We're going to change the culture here. We're going to get a winning culture going. And they've done that. And you see it sort of every week. You see it. The feeling for this team is like, this is not the same old Lions. This is a legitimate, formidable, scary team. But at some point, the rules of the game still apply, and they have lost so many bodies on defense. Do we think that that's going to be their undoing, either in a game like this against Minnesota or once they get into the playoffs, or are they still able to overcome that because of how good the offense is, because of Dan Campbell's aggressiveness on fourth down? Is this a critical flaw of the injuries on defense?
Well, they've really overcome it all year. If you look at it, guys, I mean, this isn't a new situation that they're dealing with injuries, right? I mean, Aiden Hutchins was lost, I think, week 5. They've been able to counter. Derek Barnes was lost week 3. They've lost some key pieces early in the season. Marcus Davenport was week 3. And so, they found guys to step in and just find a way. And look, you mentioned the offense, and, that's the catalyst for this football team. And what they've done defensively is they've made a big stop here or there. They've been able to come up with a big stop here or there. And I think that's the model moving forward, right? You're going to score points. I look at it similarly to what New Orleans did back when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago. It was offensively generated. They scored, I think, 30-something to win it. And they made some key stops in certain spots, had a couple key takeaways. And I think that's going to be the formula for success here in Detroit. They obviously have a ton of weapons offensively. They've got one of the best offensive lines. I think they might be even more dynamic with Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, getting as many carries as he has. Jamison Williams has really come on, been that great, Robin to Amon-Ra St. Brown's Batman. And it's a fun offense to watch with Ben Johnson kind of pulling the strings and going into his bag of tricks. And then defensively, like we saw in San Francisco, right? You gave up a ton of yards. Brock Purdy had some success, but when you needed it in the fourth quarter, Kirby Joseph came up with a big interception, 2 of them actually. He's got 9 on the season. You came up with a big stop late. So I think that's going to be the formula of success. You're going to outscore some teams and then hope your defense comes up with that big stop, that big turnover that can swing it late.
With all the injuries, are there? We had heard rumors about Aiden Hutchinson maybe being ready for the Super Bowl, or that week if possible. Are there reinforcements coming? Anyone coming back? Are there possibilities of players coming back?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger ones is Alex Anzalone, and they might get him back as early as today's practice. We'll kind of see where that goes, and he could play week 18. I think he's certainly in line to come back in the playoffs. And then I think a big one that I don't think is going to be right at the beginning of the playoffs, but everybody talks about that loss of Aiden Hutchinson and Derek Barnes and some of those pieces up front, but Carlton Davis III was playing terrific football at corner, and I think that was a huge loss for this football team. It made them kind of have to shuffle everything around. Brian Branch is playing the nickel now. Afatu Melifonwu comes in and plays some safety. They've had to change some things in what they do. That's been a big injury, fractured his jaw, but they think they can get him back for the NFC Championship game if they make it that far. So I think that would be a huge addition, because it goes back to now you can kind of play the aggressive man coverage with the 2 corners that you trust, and Brian being a playmaking safety alongside Kirby. You move Amik Robertson back into the nickel, and I think that just settles things down with your pass defense and your secondary. So that will be a big one. And then, look, I wouldn't put it past Hutch to come back for the Super Bowl, just knowing him and the way he works. I think the last time I saw him, he was still kind of walking with a limp. So, we'll see where that goes. He thinks he's going to be back, but I think getting Alex Anzalone, getting Carlton Davis, I think those are 2 big additions that they could get back for the playoffs that would really help this Lions defense.
Looking specifically at this Vikings game, the last few times the Vikings and the Lions have played, generally this Brian Flores defense has flummoxed all kinds of offenses, quarterbacks here at the NFL. The one exception to that really has been Detroit. And I think last year is slightly different to this year. Last year it felt like they had all the answers, and no matter what Flores threw at them, they just were able to pitch and catch and make plays. The first game this year felt a little more well contested. Like the Flores defense was actually dialing up some good stuff. It did cause problems, but then Goff was able to make plays anyway. Do you think that this offense does have something of the code to defeat this Flores defense, particularly this week?
Well, they've beaten them, the last 4 times, obviously. So, they've had Minnesota's number here of late. In that game that you were talking about, I think Jared was 22 of 25 for 280 with a couple touchdowns, no turnovers. And so when you look at Minnesota and you look at that defense, I think they do a great job, obviously, generating pressure. They are heavy on the blitz. I think they're the number 1 blitzing team in the league, but they do that on first and second down. And then I think what they really do well is they almost kind of show the blitz on third and come out of it. And so it confuses some defenses. But to me, what's the key for Detroit's offense here is blitz Jared Goff at your own risk. Because if they pick it up, he's got one of the highest passer ratings in the NFL against the blitz. And you blitz, you're going to put Amon-Ra St. Brown one-on-one. You're going to put Jameson Williams one-on-one. We've seen the kind of playmaking that he's done over the last month or so. You're going to put Sam Laporta one-on-one. You're going to get Gibbs in the flat against a linebacker. Good luck with that. And so if you're going to blitz Jared Goff, you better get home. And that's the biggest thing. I think that's going to be one of the real big keys for this matchup Sunday night. Detroit's been so good at kind of picking up that blitz with this offensive line, with Frank Ragnow, who's one of the best centers in the league. I think you guys have him, graded, amongst the best there. And he's terrific at kind of, seeing where the pressure's coming, getting the protection set up. Their backs do a good job picking it up. And if you pick it up and leave all those weapons one-on-one, Jared is just so good and so experienced at identifying the matchup that he wants and getting him the football and doing it accurately. I think that's going to be a real big part of it. Can Minnesota get home on their blitz, generate that pressure, force some bad throws, some incompletions, get some sacks, get Detroit in some second and third and long situations? Can Detroit pick it up? And if they can create some big plays offensively, and that's going to be a big dynamic to this game, I think.
Tim, you mentioned Kirby Joseph, and we were talking about him just before you got on the air. 9 interceptions, and Sam here is an AP voter. So if you want to state your case here, there's not a great group of Defensive Player of the Year candidates this year. Is Kirby Joseph a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in your mind?
I mean, 9 interceptions, I think, speaks for itself, right? I mean, you talk about, what's the big statistic for, the front seven, right? You get those sacks, right? Who gets those guys? Well, it's the big plays. It's playmaking. You look at how big those 2 interceptions were against San Francisco, right? They were having a difficult time stopping Purdy in that offense. And, we talked about how banged up they are on defense, needed some big plays. And it just seems like all year long, Kirby's kind of been that guy that has stepped up, gotten that big interception right at the end of the half of the Green Bay game where he had that pick 6, kind of completely changed that game in Detroit's favor. We've seen that over and over and over again, and the numbers speak for themselves. He's got 12 passes defended. That's a career high. 9 interceptions. He's going to have over 80 tackles. He's a guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. And when you got 9 interceptions, if you get to 10, I think you can be in the conversation. I still think, AP voters, and not to put anything down on you or you guys, but look, they love sacks. They love those guys that get after the quarterback, and look, those guys are so important and so vital. But if Kirby gets to 10 interceptions and has the kind of impact that he has, especially makes a big play and Detroit finishes this thing out, wins the division, gets the number 1 seed, and you got a player back there with 10 interceptions that had a big impact, I think he deserves to be in the conversation.
The some people have said all the way through the season, they keep breaking out all these trick plays. Dan Campbell's 4th down aggressiveness is kind of off the charts, and people have kind of said, look, this is what's going to cost them in the playoffs because they're going to get too aggressive or they're going to run out of trick plays. There's too much on tape. Do you think that this team has more in the bag, that they're actually going to step up in the postseason the way a lot of other teams do? Or are they just comfortable being like, this is who we are, overall this is going to work in the playoffs just as well as it's going to work in the regular season? What is your read on the dynamic with that, 4th down aggressiveness, maybe 2-point conversion aggressiveness, and the trick plays that seem to be all over their tape this year?
Well, you guys talked about the culture earlier, right? And that's part of the culture that Dan has built here. It's trust, it's aggressiveness. It's look, I trust my offense. They are the ones that got us here, right? And if I'm going to win or lose, I'm going to win or lose with the offense having the football. And he's okay with that. And that's the culture that they've built in the trust. And to your question about looking forward into the playoffs, I mean, I think that bank is pretty full for Ben Johnson. He's got a lot in reserve. It was funny, we talked about this last week with him, and Detroit's got 3 assistant coaches that are kind of in charge of the specials, right? And he said they just constantly bring stuff to his desk, and he's kind of had to shoo some away and say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and then turn his head and like, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But he'll look at it, and so the bank is full. There's going to be some stuff that they pull out. There's going to be some stuff they pull out here on Sunday. It's just kind of part of their DNA, what they do, and they don't just do it to pull it out or to show it. I mean, a lot of these plays are really successful. You look at the stumble bum from Chicago, the hook and ladder, the lateral from San Francisco the other day. They pulled that one out against Arizona week 3. They just like pulling that stuff out. They even faked a reverse to Penei Sewell. I guarantee there's something coming. Ben put that on tape for some reason, and you're going to see a different wrinkle to that one. And that's the genius of Ben Johnson. He does this, shows it, but then has another wrinkle to it, a different set of it, and he just keeps it in the back of his head, and he's got it right there. And you're going to see a lot of that. It's just kind of who they are, who this offense is. It's going to continue as long as you're seeing the Detroit Lions play football games.
I now desperately want to see what landed on the cutting room floor. Like, what were the things that got vetoed, given what they're actually putting out there?
Listen, Ben, hear me out. Jet sweep to Dan Skipper, pitching it to Penei coming around. You got to get Penei in space, right? But Dan Skipper's going to set it up on the jet sweep first. And
speed option
gets
using,
booted out of the office.
Speed option using Dan Skipper pitching it to Penei Sewell on the outside.
I'm telling you guys, those things have probably come up and been talked about. They have meetings on specials here. It's just part of what they do, and it's fun, right? It's why watching this team is so fun for just the casual football fan, and why the television networks love the Detroit Lions, because they're fun to watch.
Tim, Ben he was probably the hottest name as far as head coaching candidates last year, and will be again this year. Do you see him going? Do you see him taking a job? Is he going to be picky again? And on top of that, can he bring this? People are going to try to replicate Detroit's culture that we keep talking about? Can Ben Johnson replicate the culture somewhere else as well, in addition to just being a great play caller?
Well, I think Ben Johnson's going to be his own guy, right? I think there's one Dan Campbell, and he's going to do it a little bit differently. I will say this: Ben Johnson wants to be a head coach. He said as much when we talked to him a week ago, but certainly the situation has to be right. I mean, he's got a great thing going here, and I think the one big key to this is, and he's seen this play out in Detroit, is the best relationship that any football team can have is the relationship between the general manager and the head coach. You've got to have a general manager that can identify talent, and then you've got to have a head coach and a coaching staff that can develop it. That is why Detroit Lions are 14-2 and sitting at the number 1 seed right now. It's because Brad Holmes has drafted really, really well, and Dan Campbell and his staff have then developed it. He's seen that recipe, and that's going to be, I think, key in any decision that he makes. Does he trust that the guy ahead of him, that his boss can get the right talent in here, and then he obviously believes and knows that he can develop it. But I think that's going to be part of the interview process, and Ben's decision is the structure above him, from ownership to management. Is that sound? Are they on the same page? Because it certainly is the case here in Detroit, and he's seen if that relationship is going good, then the rest of it will fall into place.
Last thing I just wanted to ask in relation to that, we see good teams, have their coordinators plucked, and, Aaron Glenn could be a head coaching candidate as well. Could be out both coordinators this offseason. Are there heir apparents in the building? Are there others? Like, who would be offensive coordinator if Ben Johnson, when and if he gets a head coaching job?
Yeah, it's hard to say because Dan's been around this league for a long time, so he certainly has some names and some lists, and I think he would interview both outside and internally. I think Tanner Engstrand is a name to think about offensively. He's been the pass game coordinator here under Ben for the last couple of years. Ben's kind of been grooming him a little bit, and then on the defensive side of the ball, Calvin Shepard, the linebackers coach, same thing. Aaron Glenn's kind of been grooming him, letting him stand in front of the room. Defensively, run some of those meetings. The players have a ton of respect for him, a former player who now is getting really a lot out of that linebacker room. So those would be two names, but I think the list would certainly be long, and Dan would take a long look at it.
Well, Tim, we appreciate you joining us. Do you have a final prediction for the game? Lions win by how much?
Yeah, I think it's going to be close, guys. I think it's going to be high scoring. I think it's going to be close. I'm going to say 38-35 Detroit. It's going to be a thriller, and there's going to be a key stop, key play, key turnover there late in that game. That's going to be the difference, but it's going to be must-watch television, and NBC is going to get all that they wanted in that matchup for last game of the season.
I love it. Tim Twentyman, Happy New Year to you, and Detroit Lions senior writer and insider. Go check out his work. Tell everybody once again where they could find everything you're doing.
Yeah, DetroitLions.com, obviously, and then you can find me at T20Man on X.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Happy New
guys,
Year.
thanks.
You'll see you soon.
Take it easy. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.